Each year, as the Islamic calendar turns a new page with the month of Muharram, Muslims around the world are drawn once again to the plains of Karbala, not in body, but in heart and spirit. It is there, over 300 years ago, that one of the most profound moments in Islamic history unfolded, not only shaping the course of religious thought, but also offering a timeless beacon of moral clarity and spiritual resilience. The story of Karbala is not merely a tale of tragedy. It is a living message of sacrifice, justice, faith, and unyielding devotion to truth. It speaks to every generation, transcending sectarian, cultural, and temporal boundaries. At the heart of this story is Imam Hussein ibn Ali, the beloved grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him and his family, who refused to submit to tyranny and chose to give everything, including his life, to preserve the integrity of Islam. As the Islamic New Year begins, many seek direction, renewal, and spiritual grounding. In this pursuit, Karbala becomes more than a memory, it becomes a mirror. It compels us to ask who we are, what we stand for, and how far we are willing to go for our principles. Every detail of the event, every speech, every stand, every drop of blood serves as a powerful lesson for anyone seeking a meaningful life rooted in faith. The companions of Imam Hussein were not superhuman. They were ordinary believers who became extraordinary through their choices. And that is precisely what makes Karbala so relevant today. It reminds us that greatness is within reach when guided by sincerity and moral conviction. This reflection is not confined to sorrow and mourning. It is an invitation to grow, to change, and to realign with divine values. As we enter the new Islamic year, there is no better place to seek guidance than the legacy of Karbala. In the lessons that follow, we will uncover how the courage, wisdom, and patience displayed on that battlefield can inspire us to begin this year with purpose, passion, and a deep connection to our faith. Karbala is not in the past, it is a path, and the journey begins now. When Imam Hussein stood before the forces of Yazid, he was not accompanied by an army of thousands. He did not have political power, military might, or worldly influence. What he possessed was a firm commitment to truth, and it was this unwavering stand that turned the dusty plains of Karbala into sacred ground. He knew well the cost of his refusal to pledge allegiance to a tyrant, but his soul was not for sale. His stand was not for power or recognition, it was for principle, for the integrity of Islam, and for the protection of moral values that were being distorted by a corrupt regime. This act of defiance was not rooted in rebellion for its own sake, but in loyalty to the prophetic legacy that he could not betray. Even when faced with the certainty of death, Hussein chose dignity over submission, truth over convenience. What makes this lesson so powerful is not just its historical weight, but its personal relevance. Today, standing for truth is rarely easy. It might mean telling an uncomfortable truth at work, challenging an injustice in your community, or simply refusing to be part of a popular but harmful trend. Sometimes, it means standing alone, being the only one to speak up when everyone else is silent, or being criticized for refusing to compromise your values. But Karbala reminds us that truth does not require numbers. It requires courage. It is often the lonely voices in a crowd who spark the greatest change. Imam Hussein's example shows us that truth is worth everything, even if the world turns against you. In a time when misinformation spreads rapidly and moral lines are blurred, the call to uphold truth is more urgent than ever. The Islamic New Year gives us a moment to pause and reflect on what we stand for. Are our decisions shaped by fear of judgment or a desire for approval, or are they grounded in sincerity and accountability before God? The legacy of Karbala challenges us to examine whether we are speaking the truth when it is needed most, whether we are honest in our dealings, and whether we are defending the rights of others, even when it comes at a personal cost. Standing for truth is not only an act of resistance, it is a form of worship. It is a declaration that our allegiance is to Allah and to the values He has ordained. Imam Hussein did not seek martyrdom, he sought reform. His sacrifice teaches us that even in the face of overwhelming odds, one individual's integrity can illuminate generations. As we begin this Islamic year, Let us carry that light with us not just in our prayers and commemorations, but in our daily choices. Let us dare to be truthful, even when it is difficult. Because if Karbala teaches us anything, it is that truth does not die, it lives on in the hearts of those brave enough to defend it. In the shadow of death and overwhelming odds, the companions of Imam Hussein displayed a level of faith that continues to move hearts centuries later. They were not deluded about the fate that awaited them. They knew, with clarity and certainty, that standing with Hussein meant likely dying on the battlefield. Yet, not a single one of them hesitated. Their hearts did not waver. What gave them such steadfastness was not a promise of worldly reward or victory. It was faith, pure and unshaken. They believed that loyalty to truth and righteousness, even in the face of certain death, was far more valuable than a life bought by fear. They believed that Allah was with them, and that whatever they gave up in this world would be rewarded in a far greater realm. Fear did not control them. Faith did. This contrast between fear and faith is central to our everyday lives. We may not stand on a battlefield, but we face moments of choice that test our trust in God. Fear can come in many forms: fear of failure, of rejection, of financial insecurity, of losing relationships, or of being misunderstood. Sometimes fear masks itself as practicality or compromise, making it seem like the safe path is always the best path. But the example of Karbala teaches us something deeper. When we act out of fear, we often abandon our higher principles. When we act out of faith, even in the face of risk or difficulty, we align ourselves with divine purpose. Faith is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to move forward despite it, because we believe in something greater than our circumstances. As the Islamic New Year begins, it's an opportunity to reflect on the areas of our life where fear may be holding us back. Are we delaying a difficult but important decision because we're afraid of the consequences? Are we quiet about our beliefs or values in spaces where they need to be voiced because we fear disapproval? Are we compromising our ethics for comfort, thinking it will protect us from hardship? Imam Hussein's journey to Karbala was one of absolute trust in Allah's wisdom and plan. He didn't know how events would unfold, but he knew what he had to do, and he placed his full reliance on the one who controls all outcomes. Choosing faith over fear doesn't mean recklessness. It means aligning our choices with what pleases Allah, even when the path is hard. It means remembering that the results of our efforts are not in our hands, they are in God's. The companions of Hussein were few, but their faith outweighed the vast army that stood against them. Their courage came not from confidence in themselves, but in their deep reliance on the justice, mercy, and wisdom of their Creator. As we enter this new year, let us take that faith with us. Let us walk into uncertainty with the conviction that when we choose what is right, Allah will guide and sustain us. Faith, after all, is what transforms ordinary people into timeless heroes. In the story of Karbala, one of the most striking qualities that shines through is the unwavering loyalty of Imam Hussein's companions. Among them, none embodied this virtue more deeply than Abul Fadl al-Abbas. Known as the Moon of the Hashemites, Abbas had every reason to prioritize his own safety. As the standard-bearer of Hussein's army and a man of immense strength, he could have tried to survive the battle or even sought pardon from the opposing forces. Yet his loyalty was not transactional, nor was it dependent on the outcome of the fight. His allegiance to his brother, his imam, and ultimately to the truth was absolute. Even when his thirst was overwhelming and water was within his reach, Abbas refused to drink until he could first bring some back to the children in the camp. His actions spoke of a heart so committed that personal need and survival came second to his devotion. It was loyalty in its purest form, loyalty that did not flinch in the face of hardship, loss, or death. This depth of loyalty defines the character of those who stood with Hussein. Their support was not limited to words or convenience. They remained by his side through unimaginable suffering, driven not by personal gain, but by a higher sense of duty and love. In every era, true loyalty reveals itself when times are hardest. When things fall apart, when standing with someone becomes costly, when you have everything to lose and little to gain, that is when the measure of one's loyalty becomes clear. In Karbala, This loyalty was tested at every turn, and it remained firm to the end. In our own lives, loyalty is often tested in quieter but no less significant ways. It might show up in how we support our friends, family, or community when they're going through trials. It might be reflected in how we remain faithful to our principles even when others turn away from them. It might appear in the form of commitment to our responsibilities, even when no one is watching. Often we are tempted to retreat from loyalty when it becomes inconvenient, when we feel unappreciated, or when we think we can gain more by abandoning it. But Karbala reminds us that loyalty is not about comfort or benefit, it is about integrity. As we step into the new Islamic year, it's worth asking ourselves where our loyalties lie. Are we steadfast in our relationships, or do we drift when they are no longer easy? Are we loyal to our beliefs, or do we bend when the pressure mounts? Are we loyal to God, even when His tests seem heavy? The companions of Karbala teach us that real loyalty is quiet, powerful, and proven through sacrifice. It is what makes our faith resilient, our character noble, and our relationships trustworthy. Loyalty is not only the measure of character, it is the heartbeat of sincerity. And in a world where betrayal and disloyalty are common, choosing to be loyal, like those in Karbala, is a revolutionary act. The events of Karbala are often centered around the battlefield, the warriors, and the ultimate sacrifice of Imam Hussein and his companions. Yet, what followed after the battle reveals another dimension of courage, one carried not on horses or with swords, but through words, presence, and unshakable strength. It was the women of Karbala, led by Sayyida Zainab, who upheld the mission of Hussein after the men were martyred. Their role was not passive nor secondary. In fact, it was Zainab's fearless defiance, eloquence, and resilience that ensured the message of Karbala was not buried under the sands of history. She stood in the court of Yazid, humiliated in appearance but undefeated in spirit, and delivered sermons that exposed tyranny and preserved the moral clarity of what had transpired. Her words shook the foundations of power, and her unwavering dignity inspired generations to come. The presence of women in Karbala is a powerful testament to the fact that resistance is not limited to the battlefield. It exists in bearing hardship with patience, in speaking truth when silenced, and in nurturing future generations with the fire of faith. The women in Imam Hussein's camp endured the brutal loss of their loved ones, the burning of their tents, the chains of captivity, and the jeers of enemies, yet they remained steadfast. They turned their pain into purpose. Their suffering became a sacred trust, and through it, they became the guardians of truth. Without them, the legacy of Karbala might have been erased, reduced to a moment of bloodshed rather than a movement of moral awakening. This lesson holds profound relevance in today's world. Women continue to be at the forefront of resistance in countless communities, whether they are raising children with values, speaking against injustice, or serving as educators, caregivers, and leaders. Too often, their contributions are undervalued and their voices silenced. Yet Karbala reminds us that women are not just participants in history, they are preservers and producers of it. Their emotional, intellectual, and spiritual strength is indispensable. The story of Zainab is not merely inspirational, it is instructional. It calls on us to recognize, honor, and empower the women among us who carry forward the message of faith and justice, often at great personal cost. As we begin the Islamic New Year, we are invited to reflect not only on the men who gave their lives for truth, but also on the women who lived to tell it. Their courage was not measured in battles won, but in truth upheld. Sayyida Zainab's legacy calls on both men and women to embody resilience, to use our voices responsibly, and to never underestimate the transformative power of presence and conviction. The women of Karbala were not on the sidelines of history, they were its backbone. They taught us that true resistance includes compassion, wisdom, and the strength to carry truth forward even when the world tries to bury it. In honoring them, we honor the full spirit of Karbala. In the heart-wrenching events of Karbala, where bravery and sacrifice knew no bounds, the presence of children offers a profound and often overlooked lesson. These were not passive witnesses to tragedy, they were active participants in the stand for truth. embodying courage that defied their tender age. Among the most moving stories is that of Ali Asghar, the 6-month-old son of Imam Hussein. Though an infant, his thirst, suffering, and eventual martyrdom pierced the hearts of all who bore witness. In a single moment, his silent innocence spoke louder than any sermon, revealing the cruelty of the oppressors and the depth of his father's trust in God. Then there was Qasim ibn Hassan, the young teenage son of Imam Hassan, who approached his uncle, Imam Hussein, pleading to be allowed to fight. When asked about death, Qasim replied with the unforgettable words, "It is sweeter than honey." His love for justice and readiness to give his life for it echoed the spirit of the adults around him. These stories are not just meant to inspire sorrow, they are meant to awaken a recognition of the potential, purity, and power that reside in young hearts. In Karbala, children were not too young to understand right from wrong. They were nurtured in environments where faith, courage, and loyalty were taught not just through words but through example. The presence of children on that battlefield was not a mistake of circumstance. It was part of the message. It showed that moral clarity and commitment to truth are not reserved for adults. Even the youngest among us can be bearers of divine light. For today's families, this lesson serves as a reminder that children are far more perceptive and spiritually capable than we often realize. They absorb the values they see lived out around them. Karbala encourages us to invest in their moral upbringing not just through instruction, but through our own example of integrity, sacrifice, and trust in God. As the Islamic New Year begins, it is an opportunity for parents, educators, and communities to reflect on how we are nurturing the next generation. Are we planting the seeds of Husseini values in their hearts? Are we empowering them to be compassionate, courageous, and faithful? Karbala tells us that children are not the future, they are the now, and even the smallest among them can become heroes in the eyes of God. The soul of Karbala is sacrifice. At its core, the entire journey of Imam Hussein and his companions was a manifestation of pure devotion, expressed through the willingness to give everything for the sake of what is right. They sacrificed their comfort, their safety, their families, and ultimately their lives not for worldly gain, but for the preservation of Islam's moral compass. Sacrifice in Karbala was not an act of despair, it was an act of supreme hope. It reflected a belief that true faith demands more than belief, it demands action, struggle, and the readiness to place God's will above all else. Imam Hussein could have lived a life of relative ease had he accepted Yazid's rule, but to do so would have meant legitimizing injustice, distorting the message of his grandfather, and betraying the trust placed upon him. His sacrifice was not an isolated act of heroism, it was a declaration that faith without the willingness to sacrifice becomes hollow. This profound truth speaks to the very essence of what it means to be a believer. Sacrifice is not only about losing something valuable, it's about giving up what we love for something we love more. For Hussein and his followers, the love of God and truth surpassed every other attachment. They did not hesitate to give up the dearest of possessions, their children, their brothers, their dreams, their futures. Each martyrdom in Karbala was a step further into spiritual elevation, each loss a reaffirmation of loyalty to divine justice. These sacrifices were not forced. They were offered willingly, with hearts full of conviction and clarity. The battlefield became a sanctuary where faith was proven through pain and loss, but also through hope and trust. In our modern lives, sacrifice might not look like it did in Karbala, but it remains an essential component of true faith. It could mean sacrificing time to help someone in need, giving up wealth for a cause that reflects divine values, or letting go of personal desires for the greater good. It often means making difficult choices when our principles are at stake, refusing dishonesty even when it's profitable, avoiding sin even when it's tempting, and standing firm in faith even when it's unpopular. These moments define the authenticity of our belief. Karbala teaches us that no act of sacrifice is ever wasted when done for the sake of Allah. Every hardship, every loss borne for the truth, is written with honor and rewarded beyond our imagination. As we enter this new Islamic year, we are reminded that faith is not a passive state of the heart, it is a journey that requires struggle. Sacrifice gives faith its weight, its sincerity, its power. When we choose to prioritize our spiritual goals over our worldly comforts, we reflect the legacy of those who stood on the scorching sands of Karbala with nothing but faith to hold on to. Their sacrifices are not just stories to be remembered, they are paths to be followed. To walk that path is to understand that faith, in its most vibrant form, always comes with a price, and that the reward for paying it is eternal. One of the most striking features of the Karbala movement is the unity that bound together a group of individuals from vastly different backgrounds, tribes, ages, and even cultures. Despite their differences, they stood side by side, shoulder to shoulder, united in a single cause, to uphold truth and resist oppression. Among Imam Hussein's companions were old men and young boys, Arabs and non-Arabs, former slaves and noble descendants. Their diversity did not divide them, it enriched them. What tied them together was not blood or status, but shared conviction. They were unified by a moral clarity that transcended personal interests and tribal affiliations. Each of them recognized the spiritual significance of Hussein's mission, and they responded not as isolated individuals, but as a collective force shaped by principle and trust in God. In a world often fractured by division, be it political, ethnic, or ideological, the unity of Karbala offers a profound lesson. It teaches that when people rally around righteousness, selflessness replaces ego, and service takes precedence over personal recognition. The companions of Hussein did not compete for leadership or status. They competed in devotion, sacrifice, and love for their imam. Their example shows us that unity does not require uniformity. It requires sincerity, humility, and a common commitment to truth. True unity thrives not when everyone agrees on every detail, but when hearts are aligned in purpose and action. This message is especially vital as we begin the Islamic New Year. Communities today often struggle with fragmentation and conflict. Petty disagreements and personal pride too often stand in the way of collective progress. Karbala teaches us to rise above these divisions. If we are to address the challenges facing our families, mosques, and societies, we must learn to work together for causes greater than ourselves. Whether it's helping the poor, educating the youth, defending justice, or preserving faith, our strength lies in unity. The companions of Hussein remind us that when we unite for a righteous cause, our efforts are magnified and our sacrifices gain deeper meaning. They remind us that unity rooted in faith and sincerity can transform even the smallest group into a beacon of guidance for generations. As we reflect on the legacy of Karbala this year, may we commit to building unity not just in words, but in our actions and intentions, because righteousness is a path best walked together. Karbala was a place of profound injustice where the family of the Prophet, who represented the highest moral ideals of Islam, were denied water, attacked, humiliated, and eventually martyred. Yet in the face of this overwhelming cruelty, they demonstrated a level of patience that continues to shake the conscience of the world. Imam Hussein did not respond to oppression with rage or revenge. Instead, he bore each trial with dignity, holding firmly to the principles of sabr, patience grounded in faith and clarity. Sayyida Zainab, witnessing the brutal death of her loved ones and enduring the pain of captivity, remained composed and eloquent in her defiance. Her patience was not passive endurance but active resilience, a refusal to let injustice break her spirit or tarnish her purpose. This kind of patience is not weakness. It is one of the strongest forms of spiritual power. It reflects a deep trust in Allah's justice and a refusal to allow injustice to dictate one's response. The people of Karbala did not collapse under pressure. They bore suffering without surrendering their values. Their patience was not silence, it was strength. It was the ability to stay committed to the truth even when wronged, to maintain character in the face of humiliation, and to continue the mission of justice despite overwhelming grief. Their example reminds us that patience is not merely about waiting for relief. It is about staying firm, keeping faith alive, and continuing to act righteously, even when everything seems lost. In our own lives, injustice can take many forms, whether it's personal betrayal, systemic oppression, or public discrimination, our natural impulse is often to retaliate or become bitter. But Karbala shows us a different way. It teaches us that patience allows us to rise above the immediate pain and respond in a way that honors our faith. It's about trusting that Allah sees everything and that no act of patience is ever wasted. As we begin this Islamic year, we are invited to practice this kind of patience by becoming passive, but by remaining principled, calm, and unyielding in the face of wrong. The patience of Karbala was not the patience of defeat. It was the patience of those who knew they were on the side of truth, and that with Allah, justice would ultimately prevail. The defining stance of Imam Hussein at Karbala was rooted in a principle that has echoed through centuries, that death with dignity is better than life with humiliation. This was not just a statement, it was a lived conviction. Imam Hussein had multiple opportunities to avoid confrontation, to accept Yazid's authority, and to preserve his life and the lives of his family members. Yet doing so would have meant legitimizing corruption, enabling tyranny, and betraying the mission entrusted to him by his grandfather, the Prophet Muhammad. For Hussein, a life gained by compromising one's values was a form of humiliation. It was a denial of the very essence of faith. By choosing to face death rather than surrender his principles, he taught the world that dignity rooted in truth is more precious than any temporary comfort or security. This lesson is not confined to the battlefield. In everyday life, we are constantly faced with choices where we must decide between convenience and conscience. Sometimes, remaining silent in the face of injustice seems easier. Compromising on values for social acceptance or material gain can appear more rewarding. But Karbala reminds us that true dignity lies in standing firm, even when the cost is high. Imam Hussein's refusal to bow to falsehood was not an act of defiance for its own sake. It was a defense of the truth, a demonstration that real honor comes from faithfulness to one's beliefs, not from fear-driven compliance. Choosing dignity over humiliation means being willing to endure discomfort for the sake of what is right. It means understanding that our worth is not measured by how much we possess or how well we are accepted by society, but by how faithfully we live our principles. It means valuing our spiritual integrity more than our worldly status. Imam Hussein's example urges us to reflect on what lines we will not cross, what truths we will never abandon, and what kind of legacy we wish to leave behind. As the Islamic New Year unfolds, we are reminded that the choices we make, even in quiet moments, shape the story of our lives. We can choose a path of honor, guided by the courage and clarity of Karbala. That path may be difficult, and it may demand sacrifice, but it is the path that leads to ultimate success because it is the path that earns the pleasure of Allah. Death with dignity, as Imam Hussein showed, is not the end. It is the beginning of eternal truth. Karbala is not just a historical event, it is a living legacy that continues to shape hearts and inspire movements more than 14 centuries later. Imam Hussein did not have a large army or worldly power, but what he possessed was an unshakable sense of purpose. He knew that he might fall on the battlefield, but he also knew that the values he stood for, justice, truth, dignity, and devotion, would live on. He was not fighting for personal recognition or temporary victory. He was striving to plant a seed that would blossom through generations. His sacrifice created a legacy that transcended time and geography. Today, millions continue to remember him, not just with tears but with action, commitment, and moral reflection. This is the power of a life lived with meaning. It reminds us that true legacy is not built on possessions, popularity, or public approval. It is built on principle. Letting your legacy be eternal means living with awareness that every choice matters. It means acting with sincerity, not just for the moment, but for the mark it leaves on others. Imam Hussein's words and actions on the plains of Karbala were full of intention, guided by a deep connection to God and a sense of duty to humanity. His resilience in the face of hopelessness, his kindness even in the midst of suffering, and his steadfastness when abandoned, these became the building blocks of his everlasting legacy. His life teaches us that you do not need to live long to live meaningfully. You need to live truthfully. In our own lives, we often chase short-term success, forgetting that what truly lasts is not what we accumulate, but what we contribute. The people we help, the values we uphold, the love we give, and the courage we show, these are the threads of an eternal legacy. Whether we are scholars, parents, workers, students, or leaders, we all have the ability to shape the world around us through our example. Karbala calls us to think beyond the moment, to ask what impact our lives will have after we are gone. Will we be remembered for our integrity, compassion, and courage? Or will we be forgotten as those who chose comfort over conviction? As the new Islamic year begins, it is the perfect time to realign our intentions and renew our commitment to a life that echoes beyond our years. Imam Hussein's legacy teaches us that when you live for a higher purpose, your name lives on not in stone, but in the hearts and actions of those you inspire. As the Islamic New Year begins, we are once again brought face to face with the legacy of Karbala. It is not just an episode of mourning or a tale from history, it is a call to action, a mirror held up to our souls, and a guide for the journey ahead. Imam Hussein did not rise for power, revenge, or political gain. He rose to awaken the conscience of a sleeping ummah, to remind humanity that silence in the face of oppression is itself a form of betrayal, and that the soul of religion lies in justice, sacrifice, and unwavering faith. His message was not meant for a single time or people. It is a message for every generation, every heart seeking truth, and every believer who longs to live a life of meaning. Starting this year on the path of Hussein means realigning ourselves with the values that he embodied. It means being courageous in the face of falsehood, even when it isolates us. It means standing up for justice, even if it comes at a personal cost. It means treating others with dignity, upholding integrity, and being ready to sacrifice convenience for conscience. Karbala reminds us that faith is not merely belief, it is action. It is not enough to say we love Hussein if we do not walk in his footsteps, however humbly, in our daily lives. His path is one of spiritual resistance, of moral clarity, and of serving others with sincerity and compassion. This new year gives us the chance to begin again, to examine where we have faltered, and to commit ourselves anew to a life of purpose. Whether it is in our homes, our workplaces, or our communities, we have the opportunity to be carriers of the Husseini spirit. We can nurture patience in hardship, strive for unity in good causes, raise our children with courage and faith, and speak the truth even when it costs us. No act is too small when done with the right intention, and no life is too ordinary to be transformed by the lessons of Karbala. The path of Hussein is not paved with ease, it is paved with love, truth, and resilience. It is a path that leads not just to remembrance, but to transformation. As the days of this year unfold, may we walk that path with sincerity, and may our lives, like his, become a light for others long after we are gone.